Mga kaibigan, sa larangan po ng professional boxing, marami mga fighters that have risen to the occasion in spite of them being the underdog. So now we now ask, who in your opinion were the best Filipino boxing upsets? At meron po kami mga inilatag dito mga kaibigan ng mga laban ng featuring Filipino fighters who went up and were the underdog against a fighter who was more, how can we call it, more of llamado, mas pabor ang tao, mas matingkad ang pangalan, and eventually they won these fights. Ryan, let's start off with the fight between Manny Pacquiao and, of course, the late Leboeuf.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Leboeuf was this very celebrated fighter. I mean, that was a very big spot for Manny Pacquiao to step into. Leboeuf was a celebrated fighter. He was defending his world championship on the undercard of an Oscar De La Hoya fight. That's a big spot to be in because, you know, Oscar De La Hoya was, if not the biggest star in boxing at the time, one of them. So Pacquiao takes that fight on short notice. He was a replacement, I believe, for Enrique Sanchez.
Yes.
And stepped in and just demolished Leboeuf. Like, Leboeuf was a very skilled technical fighter, knew how to counterpunch, from South Africa, you know, intelligent, and Pacquiao just ran right through him. And I remember that last knockdown where it's almost like Leboeuf collapsed out of just his spirit being broken. He goes down and he covers his face. Like, it was just such a brutal beating. And like, when you talk about upsets, it wasn't just like, oh, he came in and got a split decision. No, he demolished Leboeuf.
Demolished Leboeuf. And I would really agree with you because it seems like for all the shots that Leboeuf was trying to counter with Pacquiao, it seems that Pacquiao was not getting hurt at all. At all. That just made him so aggressive, just came on to Leboeuf, just came in, just threw the bombs, and eventually demolished Leboeuf, who apparently, unfortunately, passed away this year.
Mm-hmm. Such a nice guy too.
Next, mga kaibigan, let's talk about the this one. I love this fight as well. Nonito Donaire Jr. versus the flashy Victor Chinen.
Yeah, so Victor Chinen was getting this reputation is almost like, you know, because a lot of his opponents were Filipinos, and he was really tearing through Filipino fighters in a big way. You know, he had just beaten Diosdado Gabi and even Nonito's older brother, Glenn Donaire. And so he had this sort of reputation as, like, you know, a guy who beats a lot of Filipinos. Until the day that he ran into one particular Filipino by the name of Nonito Donaire, and that was just Donaire's coming out party. Like, you know, Darchinian was very celebrated. He was getting a lot of big opportunities on Showtime. And in America, when you're in those lower divisions, it's really like only one fighter exists at any time. So, they don't really pay attention to the lower weights. Nonito Donaire had, you know, fought on Showbox before, so he was familiar to some people in the audience. And I remember seeing him on ESPN Friday Night Fights and thinking, this guy's pretty good. Like, you know, I want to see what happens with him. And he steps in there. He wanted revenge for his older brother, and he got it in his definitive way as possible. Darchinian, he was a very raw fighter, but awkward and very powerful. Ran into a left hook, and the corner had to jump in and make sure he didn't fall a second time.
Well, the referee had to stop the fight at 2 minutes and 6 seconds of that bout. Now, going to the next fight. This is taking us back a bit, Mr. Songalia. Andy Gannon versus Sean O Grady. All the way in 1981, my friend.
Yes, that was a big upset for Andy Ganigan. And in fact, because I remember my father telling me about Andy Ganigan. I'm like, who's that? From before my time. But Ganigan was a very big puncher. He's based in Hawaii, and
Mhm.
kind of a hard luck guy. He had a big punch, but just couldn't get to the next level and become a world champion. What he did against Sean O'Grady was just that was a real demolition job there, because O'Grady was a very popular fighter
Yes.
on American TV. He was a star, and he had been a champion as well. And Ganigan just tore right through him. Now what that did for him was it actually got Ganigan to the doorstep of becoming world champion, because
Mhm.
from that he was able to fight Alexis Arguello, and he even dropped Arguello with a pretty nice left hand. And but of course, Aguayo, one of the classiest, one of the best fighters in those weight classes, the lightweight divisions ever, was able to come back and score the knockout victory.
Next, we have Rolando Pascua versus Humberto Gomez. This fight happened on December 19 in 1990 for the WBC light flyweight title. It was held at the Great Western Forum in Inglewood, California. Let's talk about first about Rolando Pascua, who was actually very underrated against Humberto Gonzalez, Ryan.
Yeah, that was a big win for Pascua, because Chiquita Gonzalez was a popular fighter and he was a very strong fighter, but he became that win actually appreciated through as years gone by, because Gonzalez is a Hall of Famer, and he had those great fights with Michael Carbajal that sort of made him a bigger star in America. Because when you talk about two great Mexican fighters fighting, there's a lot of ethnic pride there, but also when you have great fights, it becomes big. It's like Barrera Morales. It goes into the mainstream, and those fights kind of got Gonzalez into the mainstream. But Pascua was just not to be denied that night. He was counter-punching very effectively with that southpaw left hand, was walking Gonzalez into some big punches, and that's how he was able to get the victory. And that was really stunning, because Gonzalez was undefeated at that time.
And for all of you who would be able to watch that fight, one of my tips is for you to look at round 6. The action in round 6 was really amazing. Now, for our final fight that we will review, as far as Filipinos able to win an upset, the great Jerry Penalosa versus Johnny Gonzalez for the WBO Bantamweight Championship.
Yes, Jerry Penalosa, he told me one time about this fight years later that he was actually scared. He was really concerned about Gonzalez, because he saw what Gonzalez had done to Israel, in the Israel Vasquez fight, even though, he lost that fight. Johnny Gonzalez was a huge person at bantamweight, and Jerry was really a 115-pounder. Like Gonzalez was a featherweight who somehow got down to 118, and Jerry was worried, because Gonzalez was a big puncher. And then he saw him at the weigh-in, and he looked at him, and he saw the ribs on him. So this guy was really struggling. He's like, you know what, I got him. And he didn't really get him until, he basically lost every second of the fight until he knocked out Gonzalez. But what he did was he was looking for that shot. He knew that the vulnerability for Gonzalez was to the body. He was not going to be able to reach up and get real leverage on a shot to the head. So if you looked at that fight, there were a bunch of times he was looking for that left hand to the body, and then he finally gets it. And Gonzalez, all Gonzalez could think about was trying to breathe again. He the moment he went down, he's like, the fight's over. I just want to be able to respirate.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the first major win for Jerry Penalosa, which eventually made him sort of a legend, and eventually get to be more active in the years to come.